Sorry to bother you, but this movie, where do I even start? I've been meaning to make a video for years now, and for one reason or another, I've never really been able to do so. I have a ton of scripts written, I have a few videos that are already recorded, but I never really found the time to edit, so I've always wondered what it would take to motivate me to write an entire script, record it, edit it, and upload it. You know, whatever it is, it would have to be a cultural phenomenon, an instant classic that everyone will be talking about for decades to come. Fuck. So, MADEA Homecoming is a 2022 film written and directed by Tyler Perry, and the film stars the usual suspects, including Tyler Perry himself as the titular character, MADEA, as well as her brother Joe. My first exposure to Tyler Perry's work was back in 2003.
You better start believing in ghost stories, Miss Turner. You're in one.
My father brought home a bootleg copy of Diary of a Mad Black Woman, the stage play. And this was years before the movie version was released, and you know, I thought it was alright. I mean, I was like 10 and I hadn't seen any stage plays at the time, so A few years later though, we watched the movie adaptation, and to this day, that movie is still the best entry in the entire series. Specifically because Tyler Perry did not direct it. So even if the movie had really shitty politics, and like most movies in the series is basically a revenge glorification movie. You know, this man was an abusive asshole to you, but now that he's disabled, you can abuse him back and exact sweet, sweet revenge.
She didn't give a damn about you, Charles.
Stop! Hey, stop!
And the audience cheers. But the movie was just slick enough that you could watch it and not think too much about the implications. The writing and directing of the other movies in this series are so bad that it constantly draws attention to all of the worst aspects of the franchise, which are plentiful. So when I heard that Tyler Perry would be writing and directing a MADEA movie with LGBT characters for Netflix, I have to admit, I was pretty interested. You see, Tyler Perry's movies aren't exactly what you would call good, but they don't really have to be. I mean, I'm Nigerian and we have an entire industry dedicated to cheaply produced and disposable movies, so I was expecting something mostly harmless that would at the very least put a spotlight on black LGBT characters at the center of the narrative in one of the most popular franchises between African Americans, a community that, to be fair, needs a lot of help when it comes to positive LGBTQ representation.
Pause? Pause what?
You said something gay, so you gotta say no homo, or else you's a homo.
So I don't know how else to say this, but this movie is a fucking mess. It's so horrible in so many ways that I wasn't really sure how to even talk about it. Your usual problems with Tyler Perry movies are present. His films are recorded in a very short time frame, and a lot of the jokes are just ad-libs. There are usually some pacing issues with the movie, and the movie's politics are usually terrible. So let's talk about it. This movie opens on a joke. Mr. Brown is trying to make a barbecue, but he's putting way too much lighter fluid on because this is how you do it, he says. So of course he sets himself ablaze and MADEA has to come out and help him. So she grabs a cup and then switches it to a smaller teacup and fills it with water, goes outside and throws it on Mr. Brown. And the fire doesn't go out because the water is small. That's the joke. She then grabs a hose and then just drizzles water on him while Joe pretends to spit on him to put out the fire, and then the title appears. I mean, wow, this was the opener. This was the joke that was designed to keep the audience hooked. The thing is, the joke doesn't work on so many levels, and it's so frustrating because they are not that hard to improve. Like, MADEA could have just taken the teacup, gone outside, and in a twist proceeds to casually drink the water while telling Mr. Brown to duck, cover, and hold, and basically giving him useless advice because MADEA don't care. That would have been funny, and would have been shorter too, more to the point. Anyway, so now the movie opens proper, with the characters whose story drives the plot. Tim, MADEA's great-grandson, and his roommate, Davi, are driving over to MADEA's house to celebrate the fact that they are graduating. And they compliment each other, and during the conversation, Davi says,
I don't know what the rush is, but I know what the delay is. You don't want to tell them.
No, I don't.
I don't want to pressure you into this, but it's 2021. We graduate in 2 days. They should know.
Here referring to Tim's sexuality and, assumedly, their relationship. Tim explains that his family is different so they wouldn't get it. Davy then responds by explaining his family's background, how his father is West Indian and his mother's Irish. So actually, his family is the one that's different. Checkmate? Tim relents and says, well, I can't wait to meet your family. A thing you say to someone you are in a relationship with. This will be important later. Davy then backpedals and says that they shouldn't rush it, to which Tim remarks, oh, I can come out to my family, but you can't confront your great aunt Agnes? Davy replies that it's a different story because Tim's mom is really open-minded, so she will be okay with her son's sexuality. The reason I'm going through so much detail to explain the dialogue line for line is because of something that will happen in the third act of this movie, so it's important that you understand how these two characters talk and behave around each other. And I hope you're caught up because I just explained the best part of the movie. Things only go downhill from here. Because Tyler Perry is down, current and with the times, he has to talk about the thing that has been the centerpiece to black movement all around the world for a couple of years now. Black Lives Matter. So when Cora, Madea's daughter, arrives at her house, Madea goes off on a rant and says that every time she goes to the liquor store, something done burn down because people are protesting all over. And she wonders why the protesters didn't burn down the whole goddamn neighborhood. Madea doesn't seem to remark or comment as to why people are protesting, only that, according to her, property is being burnt. So this was a very common right-wing talking point during the coverage of Black Lives Matter protests. Pundits would remark that the protesters are burning down property and how you shouldn't listen to anything they have to say because they are all anarchist agitators and are burning down black-owned businesses. This got to the point that a multitude of people took guns to the protests and killed several people under the pretense of defending property. But I don't want to talk about that because that's really bleak. So let's talk about something else. Let's talk about narrative framing. This is something that is very common when writers want to express their opinion but are too cowardly to do so honestly. So instead, they have two characters with opposing views debate each other to provide the illusion of a fair and balanced coverage of the issue, only to skew and frame the debate in such a way that it portrays the side that they agree with in a positive light, whilst giving themselves cover from critics because they were merely just showing both sides of the issue. This is why it's very important not only to take note as to what the characters are saying, but who is saying it. In the case of this movie, creepy Uncle Joe, the character nobody likes, the character that is always framed as wrong in the series, the character that in the very next scene hits on a family member, takes the side of the Black Lives Matter protests, while Madea, the titular point of view character, and also the successful runaway character and star of the franchise, takes the side of the anti-Black Lives Matter counter-protest. Madea, the character in the Madea series, starring Tyler Perry as Madea, is always framed as right if you would believe it. She might have a peculiar way of resolving issues, but she's always in the right. And this betrays Tyler Perry's views on the protests and his politics because in the usual photo shoot that releases with each movie, instead of having Madea dressed up as Beyonce for her homecoming tour, Tyler Perry could have easily had Madea wearing a Black Lives Matter t-shirt and attending protests if he really was down with the struggle, but I am getting ahead of myself. Quick recap of the movie. Sylvia, Tim's mom and Cora's daughter, arrives at Madea's house with a lawyer and friend Laura, who has helped her with a divorce case against her ex-husband. She says that she worries about her sister because her sister is a cop. With all the protests going on right now, she's worried about her sister. The armed pig. Okay. Anyway, David, Tim and the pig finally arrive at Madea's house. The stage is set. And I have to point out that the pig arrives in full uniform, complete with a walkie-talkie and a gun, to a family gathering, and Joe does not like that, again being framed here as irrational and blowing things out of proportion.
You don't think I could actually arrest you?
And I protest all over your ass. I protest all over your ass.
What for?
After a while, there's a really awkward scene where the character Aunt Bam, who is Madea's cousin, sees Davy and Tim and starts hitting on them. But then Joe tells her that the boys are gay, but like in a very awkward manner, where instead of just saying gay, he keeps stressing that the boys are roommates, you know, like Uncle Peaches, and missed a really dumb joke about anal sex.
They don't get it, cause the motor is in the back. That's where all the power come from, in the back. side of it.
Well, I did this to myself. Later that evening, at the party, Agnes Brown and her daughter Kathy arrives.
Wakanda forever.
Agnes is portrayed by Brendan O'Carroll from the Irish series Mrs. Brown's Boys, and Kathy is played by his wife. There isn't much to say about this. The gag is that Mrs. Brown is basically Irish MADEA, and this is the long-awaited crossover in the cinematic universe. Unfortunately, Brendan feels lost on screen most of the time, no doubt because of the speed of the shoot and the lack of good direction, which is too bad because he looks like he came ready to play. Anyway, there is an extended gag where Agnes says one of the cringiest pieces of comedic dialogue I have ever heard in my life. She says,
Why do you all look like you have your knickers in a bunch?
Everyone interprets this to mean that she said, you all look like a bunch of... Let me explain the joke, because if you're still watching, it means you haven't died of laughter yet, so you probably didn't get the joke. Get this. She said, knickers in a bunch. They heard a bunch of... Because the sentence knickers in a bunch and a bunch of sound very similar if you were to hear it through a cell phone inside a wind tunnel immediately after watching this movie, so your brain has turned to sludge. Anyway, they all go out and eat at Red Lobster, and in the midst of a bunch of terrible jokes, Joe shows up wearing a Black Lives Matter t-shirt. Oh, look who they decided to give the shirt to. And he antagonizes the pig by talking about defunding the police, and the pig says,
The same way that we're saying defund the police, there are criminals saying the same thing. That's why crime has gotten so much worse. Think about it.
oh God, where do I even... So crime has been going down for decades now. This whole idea that crime is going up is a lie. I'm not even going to bother trying to explain that further, but just so you know. So just like the previous conversation, Joe is written and framed as irrational, just yelling slogans, and because we know Joe from the previous series, we know he doesn't really believe what he's saying. This isn't part of his character. He's just there to paint a caricature of Black Lives Matter protesters. And once again, the pig is framed as right, as she calmly responds to Joe's antagonism with really stupid one-liners fresh out of the mind of Emmett Perry Jr. Like,
Well, now you're doing the very thing that you don't want us to do. You don't want them to judge all black people as criminals, but you want to judge all police as killers?
because a job description that gives you a monopoly on violence and zero accountability and a racialized group of people asking not to get killed are the same thing if you think about it. What the hell? And then MADEA, framed as right, proceeds to lecture Joe, saying that you might at the police till you need them. You say, I don't take a stand till someone breaks into your damn house. Again, referencing the value of property over human lives. And if you do not understand why this sentence is so asinine, please have a seat. Tyler is not engaging with the argument. Calls to defund the police is nothing new. And if he had bothered to read a book or ask someone, he would know that defunding the police would involve taking all of our money we used to arm them to the teeth, complete with tanks, and instead redirect them towards funding new institutions that are more specialized and adept in dealing with situations that some guy with a gun wouldn't be necessary, which is like most things. For example, if your mentally ill brother is having an episode, would you rather they send in some child with a gun or a mental health care professional who is trained to handle this very particular situation? And it's frustrating because MADEA wasn't always like this. In Diary of the Mad Black Woman, she made it very clear that she was not a friend of the police.
I ain't scared no popo. Call the popo, ho. Call the popo, ho.
And it's funny because you can almost see a direct line between MADEA's defiance of the police over the years to the popo safety advocate she is now, coinciding with just how wealthy Tyler Perry has gotten over the years. It's almost as if the police's job is to serve and protect the property and interests of the rich and powerful. And now that Tyler Perry is a millionaire, he has a very different interaction with the police. Almost as if Later in the movie, there is an extended gag where MADEA explains that the civil rights activist Rosa Parks stole her man and ran away, and it is so baffling. It goes on forever, and MADEA slowly loses her old-timey accent as it progresses. But what really annoyed me about the gag is that Tyler Perry has the absolute balls to write what is ostensibly a fanfiction and insert his character, not just as a random black person in the 50s, but as the one who started the civil rights movement, in a movie where the very same character sides with the pigs in the fight to get accountability for the police murdering black people. It really is a shameless display of ignorance, and I can guarantee that from the bougie heights where he lives, the protest just sounds like a faraway noise that mildly inconveniences him. Tyler Perry cannot seem to reconcile his personal views of the police as a member of the upper class with MADEA's defiance of the police. Heck, in this very movie, after spending the entire movie kissing pig boots, MADEA tells Laura not to tell her sister that she's been smoking weed.
Don't be telling your sister. Damn cop.
This is the movie where Tyler Perry has bent over backwards to portray the police as nothing more than a benevolent force trying to help people out, and even he admits that early finding out would put MADEA in trouble. And it's not even played for laughs, it's not trying to show some sort of hypocrisy. The movie doesn't even acknowledge that MADEA is being hypocritical. This movie is really dumb, you guys. When they return home, they find that Tim's father, who is bald, so that tracks,
I am dark-skinned and bald, so I hate you and I hate Jesus,
is waiting for them, and Agnes and Laura have a conversation about David and how he will return to Ireland to take over his grandfather's farm. Laura looks confused, and I'm sure this will not be important at all. Tim later comes out as gay to his entire family in one of the worst coming out scenes I have ever seen, and they do that stupid thing that lazy writers do when they want to use the threat of ostracization by homophobic relatives for cheap drama, but in the end everyone is accepting and saying that they already knew. And we need to talk about this. I'm going to talk about it more in the future in a different video about a different show, but I like to call this queer gaslighting. And how it works is, you have a main character written by straight people who is gay, and you have this character anxious about coming out to their family and friends, and the entire arc usually revolves around coming out, because there is nothing more to a queer person's character than the moment they come out, of course. And when they finally pluck up the courage to do it, it turns out, surprise, everyone already knew. Hey, all that fear, all those years of panic and anxiety, it was all your fault. Your homophobia is all internalized, all in your head. Your family and friends are 100% okay with it. So what took you so long? Homophobia is a thing you do to yourself if you think about it. In fact, your family is so not homophobic that they knew all along, and they haven't been treating you any different. So if anything, you should be apologizing to them for assuming that your family and friends would be homophobic assholes that wouldn't accept you.
I don't want to pressure you into this, but it's 2021.
You see why that sucks? It's low-key victim blaming. The reason writers love to do this is to have queer characters in their story without actually putting in the work to write characters who need to overcome their homophobia, because that requires introspection and actually requires both the writer as well as the audience to confront their own internalized homophobia. Simply put, the people writing these stories don't believe homophobia exists. Not really. It's an evolution from all the homophobes are secretly gay trope to the newer homophobia only exists in the mind of a gay person trope. It is really offensive. Okay, now that we've hit our woke quota and we've gotten all that pesky gay stuff out of the way, we can finally get to what we are all here for. Straight soap opera drama. Sylvia drops a bombshell. Turns out that Sylvia, the lawyer that helped her best friend Laura in her divorce case against Richard, Tim's dad, has been secretly dating him. Oh yeah? You like that? Well, we've got a lot more straight people drama, so get ready to have your minds blown. The very next day, at the barbecue, and I hope I'm not stating the obvious, but in the midst of a bunch of terrible jokes, Darby starts to get angry with Richard, the father of his boyfriend, Tim. This breaks out into a fight where Richard accidentally hits Laura, which prompts Darby to ask,
Baby, alright.
Baby.
That's what he said.
Oh yes, yup. He finally comes clean and reveals that he has been dating Laura, the mother of his supposed roommate and boyfriend for 2 years, And then he has the very literal motherfucking gall to propose to her in front of Tim. I mean, what the actual fuck? But we are not done here, folks. We are not done. What's that? You thought this was a gay coming out story? Well, joke's on you. That was just a misdirection. The true coming out story is of Davi coming out to everyone that he's straight and he has been dating his gay best friend's mom for 2 years. Fuck you, Tyler Perry. You have so much internalized homophobia that even your story focused around a queer character coming out to his family is about his straight friends coming out. And I'm assuming Davi is straight here for the sake of charity, because if he's like bi or pan or something and he has been actually playing both sides, this story would get much worse. Lava gets very creepy here, constantly referring to Davi as a little 26-year-old.
Let me tell you, this 26-year-old is more of a man than you've ever been. Take some lessons from this little 26-year-old.
Laura later explains to Ellie how she met and fell in love with Davi. You see, she was visiting her son in college, as you do, and while waiting for him with her son's roommate, they kind of hit it off and started dating. Now, doesn't that scene where she says that she had always known her son was gay ever since he was very little ring hollow? Because let's see if I've got this, for lack of a better word, let's say straight. You go meet your gay son in college, you know he's gay, you know he's in the closet, you know he hasn't told you he's gay, you know he has a roommate.
Let me just save you a whole bunch of time, okay? They share a partner.
Oh, your roommate?
Yes.
At no point did you even bother to consider if Tim, your son, is attracted or secretly dating this boy. And she's really petty about it too. Like, there's this scene where Ellie says that she's glad that Tim and Davi both came out. And she says, "Did they though?" While grinning like a villain.
I'm glad they came out.
Did they though?
Where were you?
Oh, I was there.
Uh-huh.
But did Davi come out? I just my baby. I'm just saying.
Like a petty high schooler who secretly stole Rebecca's boyfriend to like get even or whatever. Anyway, there is a later scene where Tim is playing basketball and Davi shows up to apologize for at the least secretly dating your mom for 2 years, or to be honest, secretly dating your mom for 2 years while stringing you along and pretending to be gay and or interested in you. Needless to say, Tim doesn't forgive him, a normal reaction to an outrageous situation, but the movie frames this as wrong and then sends MADEA, the character that is always right, to convince Tim to forgive Davi by chastising and almost blaming him because Tim claims that he didn't know what was going on between his mother and Davi because, you know, he's not a conniving, two-faced, backstabbing yellow belly bitch. But he claims that Davi talks about his mother a lot, and MADEA uses this to chastise him for not putting 2 and 2 together. Like, if you think about it, Tim, it's actually your fault. You're going to law school and you couldn't tell your best friend who you were in love with is secretly fucking your mom? Just like, how stupid are you?
He talks about your mama a lot.
Yeah.
And you didn't think something's going on? Let me understand. 2 children in college talking about your mama, a man, and you don't think something going on?
Fuck this movie. It's finally graduation day, and the family goes to congratulate the boys, and Tim gives a speech accepting Davi's apology and his relationship with his mother because he knows what it's like to have a secret. Kill me. But that's not important. You might have thought that was the climax of the story, but have you forgotten about the ticking time bomb under the table? Davi still has to go to Ireland. Uh-oh. But then Agnes shows up and is like, nah, you don't have to go. Cool. So Davi gets on his knees and proposes to Laura again, and she says yes. Against all odds, straight love prevails once again. The end. What the hell? Okay, let's spend an unnecessary amount of time talking about Tim and Davi because this shit is wild. Davi and Tim are very touchy. When they first arrive at MADEA's house, Tim gets his photo taken and Davi is just playing with him and appearing in the photo in a way that wouldn't make any sense if they were just roommates. And even if we were being charitable and assume that they were just roommates and this was just a simple misunderstanding. Tim doesn't think that they are. If Davy isn't into Tim because he's straight or something, he has to at the very least know that his roommate/friend has feelings for him, and not only has he been stringing him along, but he has also been secretly dating his mother as a massive fuck you.
Take some lessons from this little 26-year-old.
Truly the greatest gay story of our lifetime. The entire movie's setup is of Tim's sexuality and his need to come out to his family, and the entire third act flips the script and tosses him aside to focus on the story of his straight roommate. Davy's proposal to Laura and Agnes's need for Davy to go home and take over the farm, and having to understand that Davy is his own person who should make his own choices in life, would have been fine, if not remarkable storytelling on its own. But using the gay character's sexuality as a plot device for the explicit purpose of furthering David's straight narrative is beyond shitty. The entire acceptance speech that would go to a reluctant family member coming to terms with accepting their child's sexuality is just co-opted for some nonsense about Davy having to go back to Ireland and run a farm. It's fucking evil. Now, while I was making this video, YouTube kept recommending me this channel called An African Perspective that seems to be some kind of self-help for motivational type channel for lonely people, and most of the videos are centered around the philosophy of MADEA and how you can learn from her to better your own life. And just like, don't. MADEA is a terrible human being. We laugh because what she does is over the top. We laugh because she is so random and unpredictable. MADEA is a lot of things, but what she isn't is a good role model. She's petty, vindictive, manipulative, and narcissistic to a fault, which as a mirror of the writer's beliefs should tell you a lot. The cool thing about art is that it tells you a lot about the person creating it, what they chose to focus on, what they chose to omit, and in this case, whose story they chose to tell. Tyler Perry has been dabbling with writing LGBTQ characters in his work for a while now, but never to this degree, especially seeing the accusations thrown at him over the years of being a closeted homosexual or something. I was excited to see what he would do with this subject and how he would choose to approach it. And whether you like it or not, Tyler Perry is a cultural phenomenon and a massive touchstone to the African American community, a community that has a very particular brand of homophobia, and we don't tend to see a lot of LGBTQ characters in that space. And when we do, it's in some trash movie like Moonlight. Fight me. I was hoping Tyler Perry would use his powers for good. To be honest, I was hoping he would let someone else write and direct, because that is just not his bag. I'm not mad, I'm not even disappointed, I'm just very tired.